Okay, now we're moving on to section 13, and you can see the topic here is a thing called helpers. And what's kind of interesting about this is helpers are really a collection of tools, or if you want to think of them as controls, if you want to tie into your older ASP.NET knowledge, that allow you to add a bunch of different types of controls automatically to your page by using a code declaration. And they can be very useful. In fact, it's kind of interesting that they basically fit into these three categories. So you can create inputs, create links, and create forms. So I want you to think about that so you can actually create your forms using these. And in fact, some of the stuff that we've already done has been utilizing this. In fact, the one thing that you can do is once you see a few of these defined here, you can go back to what we've done and start looking at what we've done already and do a comparison. Now they have a pretty kind of exhaustive list here of all the different types of things that you can do, and I'm just going to like kind of quickly scroll through it because I'm certainly not going to talk about each one, but you can see that there's very specific things for very specific actions, almost to the point of I think kind of overload on your brain if you actually try to read this. I'm not sure who would sit down and actually do that. Really, it's more of a reference, so that if you're trying to do particular things, you can look it up. Some of them are extremely handy. Some of them you might ever use. You know, it really kind of just depends, frankly. Right, so pretty exhaustive list here for just about every type of form control that you can think of or have ever seen. It's all pretty much here, including validation components, as you see I'm scrolling through. And then they get down to page 94 here, and they want you working off of section 12 to keep that project open. If not, you're going to have to reopen it. And they want you to start taking a look at the stuff that already pre-exists in the work that we've done. So they want you to just take a look at the fact that we're using HTML action link and HTML display name 4. And you know, the way that they name them, I think, is nice because it really does imply very quickly that what you're doing. You know, so the action link, that's the one that created the create new at the top of the page. And then the display name 4, we saw that one already. And then action links once again. So when you have an action link, of course, what does it do? It turns it into a link, right? So it's a linkable object. And the display name 4 just generates the content, but it generates the content from the data source. That's really kind of the key thing here. So it's reading from the database and pulling it in. It's not just hard-coded, right, which is what you may have done in the past. So we are dynamically reading it from the database. That's what they really want you to look at. We kind of already did that in the previous video, I guess, so if you're watching that one. The next thing that you want to look at is the fact that sometimes when you have these action links that sometimes the way that they're expressed is kind of a little bit weird because part of it will trigger the action and part of it is just labeling it. But it is generating kind of an interesting little bit of code for sure. All right, notice like I have a little highlight here, and this is actually very easy to miss. That's why I highlighted it. And in fact, the first time we did this in class and I was doing it up on screen, we totally missed it, got to the end of the chapter and things weren't working because we missed the part that said, let's change the classes here. So it says, let's change the employee controller class by adding a static list and also change the index action using the following code. All right, so notice that the keyword static right here. So we have to go to the employee controller class. I am going to kind of move this off to the side here, second screening it. And we're looking for that list in the employee controller class. So that's towards the bottom. So here, we're adding the keyword static. Now there's no indication in the book that we need to remove the non-action thing, so I'm assuming I'm leaving it. That's my assumption. The list employee, that stays the same. And then what we're doing here is we're changing the name, folks, to emp list equals new list and then in brackets employee. And then we are removing the method call. Now, if you guys remember, the method call is used up in the code somewhere else. And, oh my God, yeah, everything's flagging red now. So I do need to check the expression of my code here. So public static list employee emp list, capital L, there's one. And then new list employee. So hopefully you have that correct. The rest of the stuff here does not seem to change. But I want you to notice that on page 97, right at the top, the index method is changing to match. So I'm actually going to go up to the top here where this is flagging, and I'm going to fix it. So we're not getting it from running that method. We are getting it directly from the employee list, which is now being instantiated as an object. And hopefully most of that red stuff goes away. Now, the other thing I'm catching here is the fact that maybe this non-action thing isn't a good idea. So let's do a cut on it. Wait a second and see if anything changes. Nothing changed, so I'm just going to Control Z that. Right, so you see my thinking. But boy, it sure doesn't like this stuff that I have in there now. And my thinking is that extra comma at the end, is that our problem? Nope. So what is the problem then? Let's hover. It says the best overloaded add method, blah, 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 for the collection initializer has some invalid arguments. Cannot convert from system collections generic list to simple app models employee. So what that says to me is that the stuff up top here is incorrect somehow. But what in there is incorrect? That's kind of an interesting message, right? So it says namespace, public class, new list. But one thing that I think that we are missing, I think we are missing a library here, and I think it's being implied. So if you like hover here, you notice on the second line there, excuse me, it says system collections generic list, and then it tries to list it. So it indicates that we have some sort of a break there because we changed that structure. So would adding another library help to fix this? See, the problem is it's not giving us a fix. So now we should panic, right? Run for the hills. Okay, so somebody noticed that this line here is not showing up in the book, and that is correct. So let's strike that. And then we're still, well, we have an extra curly bracket that has to go too. All right, so that should take care of most of it. Very good catch. I was actually looking at my old code to see what I was doing wrong. Okay, so for me, it took care of almost everything. The only thing that's left here as a problem is the non-action declaration, which I might assume we don't need. That's my guess. So, and of course, we can just comment it out. Let's try that. And then I'm also seeing that I probably have an extra curly bracket in the mix here. So I'm trying to figure out where the stuff collapses down. And let's take out that last one. Okay, and I have a request to go back to line 15. Here you go. I'm going to do a save while we're looking at it. So all my red flags have gone away now. Make sure that that's a capital L and that it matches down here because I had that issue. All right. Now, the other thing, the fact that they changed this index file, in the example, they're actually putting this below that list. I don't think that really matters, but I'm just pointing it out. We also need to do a little updating on the edit action. So we're going to go to that particular method. And remember, there's two versions. There's the simple version and the longer version. So the get version is the one that just puts it on the screen. The post version is the one where we do the edits, and that's what we're going to change here. So what we're going to do here is notice that we're going to simplify this declaration, and then we're going to change the contents inside here. Now notice the try-catch is being removed. So that's going away. And actually, I'm going to Control Z, because what am I doing? I'm changing the wrong one. Yeah, thank you for pointing it out after the fact. Yeah, that's it. I'm testing you. That's what it is. Never. Now, I'm finding this kind of interesting because this went away, right? So why is it there? Do need to also add some code here. Right, and I guess I'm a little perplexed as to why they're doing it like this. Okay, so we're running into the issue here where this little bit that we just added is calling upon this method that we kind of got rid of by renaming it, right? But really, if I went back and I read the instruction, it says add, not overwrite or change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to recreate the original version of this. Fortunately, I have the book, so I can just copy it in. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to go back to the previous chapter and just grab that code. So we're still using that code to grab the information. You can tell there's a lot of scrolling going on here. All right. So if you want to grab that code again, because you blindly followed me, page 77, if you want a shortcut. So now I'm going to add all that back in so we have the code for it. And here's where our non-action will come into play. And you know what? I'm not even going to bother to clean that up. Yeah, that's the code that we had before that looked like this. But when I copy pasted it in, it looks like that. So you know what? I'm leaving it because I know it works, right? And now if I go to edit, you'll notice that the underline has gone away. So that wasn't really that hard of a fix. Okay, so now that we added that back in, we got rid of our red underline here so we don't have those issues. We're now moving to page 97, the bottom of 97 onto 98. But we need to add a view for edit. So Okay, so we need to go back to where we made our changes here, and we're going to right-click right on top of the method, choose Add View, and then make a couple of selections here. So we're going to call it Edit. The template that we're working with, because we do have a model at this point, is called Edit. So it just brings in a preset. Right inside, okay, the question is, where do you right-click? And anywhere inside this method. So anywhere inside that code. View name is Edit. The template we're using is to edit. The model class that we're using is the employee model that we created. They are seemingly unchecking the reference script libraries here for some reason. I'm not going to question. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And then go ahead and click Add. And very quickly it creates the edit template. So what it does is it just looks at what your model is. It attaches to the data, builds out the page, and then gives you all the tools that you need in order to be able to edit the content. There's some very interesting pieces that are added here automatically. Okay, and some of them I want to point out. I don't want to spend too much time lecturing on it, but notice this one, for example. Yeah, so there's actually like security measures automatically built into the template. Because what happens with HTML forms, and I don't know if you guys are aware of this, is in the old days, basic HTML forms are often used by hackers to pass scripts. So people would pass like PHP or JavaScript or other server-side code into the application directly from a form. The neat thing about MVC is it's got a lot of this stuff built in to kind of like take care of that. Notice that it also puts in tools for validation. Some components are hidden. It automatically labels the components. It automatically generates messages for validation failing. And really what the book is having you do is just kind of like having you review what all this does. And if you take your time and just kind of look at it, you'll notice that it does pretty carefully join everything up from the table that you have to the data that you're working with, and gives you that complete ability to edit. At the very bottom of the page, you do get an action link that sends you back to the home page if you wish, and there's also a submit button at the bottom, which of course triggers it. All right, so we also have to go in and change the action for post. So we're going back to the controller, and now we're working on the post section of edit. So the part that actually sends the data. So we're going to right click there, and once again make a couple of tweaks. And actually, and I want to be careful here, we're not creating a view here. We're changing the interaction. So right now, when you're actually posting, you hit that submit button, even though you just got the form to make the changes. There's no code in here that tells it what to do to make the actual change. So that's what we're doing now. We're adding the code to allow it to change everything. So the first portions of it are okay. What we are going to change is the stuff inside the try section. So I'm going to grab the code from the PDF and paste it in. And yeah, you do need to put the logic here. So notice how they tell you got to put your logic in. So I'm going to paste that in. And then I'm going to try to match the format of the book. So the book is formatting it like this. And then I want you to notice that these are on separate lines. So if you do have code for the database, you would drop it into this spot. And you know what, folks, we are building up to that, just so you're aware of it. But we are setting it up so that we're once again pulling in that employee list, that whole structure, and being able to search for things based on the ID. So we're looking for one particular ID to edit. This is on page 101, Tom, right at the top. You're welcome, Tom. Thank you for being patronizing. I appreciate it. So do the people listening to this video. You are now famous on YouTube. All 5 of my subscribers are enjoying this. All right. All right. So we have the if statement that's dropped in there. The one thing that we do want to put in here, though, is here, instead of a redirect to action, we actually want to return a view. And the view that we want to return is employee. And that actually should be lowercase, like that, which matches up with the variable that we just created. Okay, so that's what it should look like so far. And if that has been done successfully, and hopefully it has, and I see no red flags, that's a wonderful thing. We should be able to hit the play button here. Launch the application. Coming up on the second screen, pulling it over. And then, of course, we are going to need to point it to the employee page. So we're going to let this load up. We'll throw an error, and then we're going to append employee. And the book's doing it lowercase, so I'm just following what they're doing. And then it's going to bring up the page. And you should have that same output we saw before. However, if you click on any link related to any of the employee, it's especially, let's say, the edit link, which we were just working on, you now get an edit interface. And you can see the information from that particular entry in the table is being pulled into the form directly, where I can then modify it. So I can switch this, give them a couple years there. And then, of course, you can click Save, hypothetically. Yeah, 29 is usually my favorite age, but the age did change. Now, the one thing that didn't happen for me is when I did the edit, and I don't know if you guys are having the same effect, I hit Save, and it's not taking me back to the index view, and I think I know why. Yours did. Okay. So for me, that's probably a byproduct of a mistake. So what we'll do, as soon as the video ends here, which is in about 2 seconds, I'm going to check my code and figure out why, and then I'll record it in once I figure that out. So hopefully you guys, I can do a comparison with yours. Yeah, so what I did is when I fixed this code here in the employee controller, and I moved the code down because it all ended up on one line, I didn't move the return statement down, so I added it in. So let's run it again. This time it should be good. Okay, of course, it's on the second screen. Index view will fail, but we'll go to employee. We'll edit one of the ones we haven't edited yet. So everybody's going to be 29 years old. And now it's going back to the index view. So just missing the return call, and that's all it took. All right, folks, that wraps up 13, and we'll see you next week.